First of all, I would like to thank OSA leadership and Professor Asafa Jalata for giving me this opportunity to present at this conference. I was asked to speak on the moral, ethical, and religious justification for the liberation of Oromia. And the topic I selected for this is stand as free people. Um, the topic is taken from a text written to the Galatians people by Saint Paul from chapter 5, Galatians chapter 5, verse 1. The verse reads, freedom is what we have. Christ has set us free. Stand then as free people and do not allow yourselves to become slaves again. So Paul is exhorting the people in Galatia. He is telling them that God has set you free. You are a free people. And now the question is not that you were set free, because you were, but the question is whether you are firm enough, whether you would be able to defend your freedom and stand as a free people. So in this regard, I'm going to speak for the next few minutes. The Oromo worldview is shaped by mainly by the three major religions that the Oromo follow: Waqf, Christianity, and Islam. All three religions hold that God is a creator and sustainer of the universe. The Oromo say Waqa creates all things, and the Oromo believe that humans are created in God's image, and that God has endowed his people with free will, the capacity of free will, the ability to choose. So what does the Oromo worldview holds? It holds that life is precious and should be protected. The Oromo believes that all life belongs to Waka, and man is not free to dispose it. Even the animals and plants that people are allowed to kill for food, they were blessed for such a purpose by Waka. Because of that, the Oromo daily social intercourse is floating in blessings. The Oromo bless their kids, and they bless each other. They bless their households. They bless your animals and everything. So the Oromo speech begins and ends with blessings. So the Oromo believe that all humans are created equal, and that God has endowed everyone so that they would be able to sustain life. This sustenance of life is like so that they would be able to work with their hands to produce what they need in life, so that people are able to serve other people and other creations as well. And the Oromo believe that God has set boundaries for all. This boundary is what the Oromo call Safu. Probably it could be translated as ethics. What does it include? It is a system of moral principles. This principle is good for mutuality of life. And this principle set rights and responsibilities, and it also provides a language of good and bad. the language of good and evil. So what do the Oromo believe in Safu? They say that everything has a boundary. There is a boundary between God and man. There is a boundary between one human being and the other. And there is also a boundary between the human beings and all God's creation. Um, this is actually also backed by modern ethics and philosophy, right? Human rights should be treated as an end in themselves. Um, so humans should not be treated as a means to an end, because uh, human beings, they have an innate value, an innate worth, right? And so they should be respected. They should be treated with respect. Ethics actually speaks to nature, to reason and history, and also to international law, right? It relates. It takes it is values from these sources, right? Um, and these sources hold the laws of nature, the laws of reasoning, history, and international law hold that every person, every human being has right to freedom, to liberty, and to life. Collectively, every nation, every people has the sovereignty to defend itself, right, against any oppressor. And also, this it holds that when an oppressor, an aggressor comes and oppresses someone, or a nation with lesser resources, with lesser ability to defend itself, it is a responsibility of others also, not only to stand with the oppressed, but also to defend the oppressed one. So the Oromo hold that as God's creation, everybody is free to lead its life, right? And this is within these ethical boundaries, within the Safu that God has provided. And as we said earlier, these human beings are endowed with free will, the capacity to choose. So in that relation, even God himself, being the creator and the sustainer of life, is not going to coerce anybody, right? And that's why the scriptures say, the Lord is good to all, and his mercy is over all that he has made. So he doesn't discriminate between people. Doesn't discriminate between nations. God doesn't discriminate between individuals. God is good to all, right? And God is gracious to the ungrateful and the evil as well, right? So as God's creation, as God's people, we are supposed to emulate his character. We have to be good to all people. We have to be gracious to others. That's what the the religions teach us. But then sometimes these boundaries are broken, right? The ethical boundaries, they are broken. That means one becomes an aggressor against the other. And when that happens, the Oromo say, Safu tu chabe. When the Safu is broken, when the ethical breakdown happens, this is what the Oromo call Chubbu. Chubbu could be translated both as sin, also as injustice. So when one breaks the safu and transgresses against the other, right? Now Chubbu happens, injustice happens, sin happens. When Chubbu happens, when sin happens, right? And this is a no, right? It is something that is hated, something that is despised. And Surah 733 says, sins and trespasses against truth or reason. So when this chubu happens, this chubu, this sin, this injustice is happening against the truth and reason. And Oromo says, Ugan ilma waqati. Truth or justice is the son of God. Because in Oromo, Uga stands for truth, and Uga also stands for justice. And so, Chubu is an act by which one takes his own fate on his own hands, right? That is when you deny your total dependence on Waka, on God. And by the way, when people are lording over the other person, right? When nations are trying to be overlord over the other nation, and this is one of the fundamental or the most important chubus that could happen, injustices that happen, because when one overlords the other, he is saying, "I'm your God now. I'm your master. You should depend on me. You should not depend on God. You should depend on me." That's what it means. When transgression happens, God takes the side of the oppressed, and he advocates for and stands with the oppressed. The biblical scriptures speak to this often. One of the texts I have here is, if you look at Isaiah chapter 58, verse number 6, it says, it speaks to the kind of fasting that the Lord has elected. He says, the kind of fasting that I have elected, he says, free those who are wrongly imprisoned, lighten the burden of those who work for you, let the oppressed go free, and remove the chains that bind people. Right? So as God's creation, as God's beings, right? God wants us to free those who are wrongly imprisoned, lighten the burden of those people who work for us. So in employee-employer relationship, right? In the political relationship, governor-governee, right? Relationship, freedom, lightening of burden, right? And letting go, letting free the oppressed one, removing the chains that bind people. This is what God wants from us. And then when we look at the history, at human law, at international law, we say that these principles that we see in the Oromo worldview, which are shaped by the Oromo religions of Wakefata, Christianity, and Islam, are also enshrined in international law. So I'm going to provide 3 exhibits. Exhibit number 1 is a Universal Declaration of Human Rights. Article 1 of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights reads, all human beings are born free and equal in dignity and rights. They are endowed with reason and conscience and should act towards one another in a spirit of brotherhood. All human beings are born free and equal in dignity and rights. They are also endowed with reason and conscience, and their relationship, their action to one another should be in a spirit of brotherhood. Article 3 is everyone has a right to life, liberty, and security of person. Article 4 says no one shall be held in slavery or servitude, and slavery should be abolished. The second exhibition comes from the unanimous declaration of the 13 United States of America, which is usually known as the preamble to the Declaration of Independence. I know some of the text in the preamble are very familiar. They are well spoken of much of the time, and some are not really that much emphasized. This text we see on the screen now is a one which is has been neglected sometime, I think. When in the course of a human events, it becomes necessary for one people to dissolve the political bonds which have connected them with another, and to assume among the powers of the earth the separate and equal station to which the laws of nature and of nature's God entitle them, a decent respect of the opinions of mankind required that they should declare the cause which impelled them to the separation. So when there was a relationship, and that relationship, that bind, is not a voluntary one. That relationship is not a life-giving relationship. Then the laws of nature and the laws of nature's God require that those people should, right? They should sever that relationship. They should cut off, and they should declare their position, right? Assume among the powers of the earth the separate and equal station to which the laws of nature and nature's God entitle them. So Oromia has been in shackles for 150 years to the Ethiopian Empire, not by the Oromo's will, not by Oromo's declaration. And this relationship has shackled the Oromo and has costed the Oromo multitudes. What Oromo has benefited from this relationship is being in servitude, being enslaved, being killed, extrajudicial killings of its sons and daughters, losing its economic resources, right? Not having a stand, an equal stand among the nations of the world. And since this relationship is not a life-giving relationship, it is time for the Oromo to untie themselves and to declare causes which compel them to the separation. Another part of the declaration says, we hold this truth to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, that they are endowed by their creator with certain unalienable rights, that among these are liberty, life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. And the Oromo has been denied this opportunity for the last 150 years. So, to secure this right, governments are instituted among men, deriving their just powers from the consent of the governed, that whenever any form of government becomes destructive of these ends, it is a right of the people to alter, to abolish it, and to institute new government, laying its foundation on such principles and organizing its powers in such a form as to them shall seem most likely to effect their safety and happiness. The government of the Empire of Ethiopia did not derive its powers from the people, and it is not working for the safety, development, rights, life, liberty, and freedom of the people. So such a government needs to be abolished. Such a government needs to be altered. Such a government needs to be brought to its knees. So, when a long train of abuses and usurpations pursuing invariably the same object evinces a design to reduce them under absolute despotism, it is a right, it is their duty to throw off such government and provide new gods for their future security. So it is the right, it is the duty of the Oromo people to throw such a government and provide for their future security. The third exhibit comes from the preamble to the Constitution of the United Nations. So there are four pillars. Pillar number one is peace and security. Pillar number two is human rights. Pillar number three is rule of law. And pillar number four is development. The preambles reads as such: we, the peoples of the United Nations, determine to save succeeding generations from the scourge of war, which twice in our lifetime has brought untold sorrow to mankind. So, to save succeeding generations from war, peace and security, and to reaffirm faith in fundamental human rights, in the dignity and worth of the human person, in the equal rights of men and women, and of nations large and small, respect of human rights, to establish conditions under which just and respect for the obligations arising from treaties and other sources of international law can be maintained. This is what they call the rule of law. And finally, to promote social uh, progress and development. So when we look at the Ethiopian empire, what we see is there is no peace and security, there is no respect of human rights, there is no rule of law, and there is no progress and social development. So such a government needs to be abolished. As I said before, when chubu happens, when one transgresses over the other, then it is the duty of the other to protect itself, to protect its nation, to protect its population. So this principle of just war is developed initially by Christian theologians, and later on, these are being adopted um, by different religious backgrounds as well as international law. Six important concepts are included. One, war should be a last resort. Um, as I said earlier, God created life, and man doesn't have the right to dispose of it. So when a man takes the life of another person, this should not be done so easily, no, so um, carelessly. Because of that, um, every effort should be done, every peaceful effort should be done before one resorts to war. But when the protection, the safeguarding and security of a nation, of a people, requires that one has to take arms, then that arms should be raised, but as a last resort. And the purpose of a war, even a just war, should be to redress an equity that has been done. So the purpose of war, just war, is to bring back peace. And the war should be waged by a legitimate authority, right? Since in a democratic society, authority rests with the population, with the nation, not with the governors, not with authorities themselves, right? This proper power that is declared, proper war that is declared by the people, by the nation, is the right one. A war can only be just when it is fought with a reasonable chance of success. Right? The Oromo are fighting for their land. The Oromo are fighting for their dignity. The Oromo are fighting for their life. The Oromo didn't go to wage a war on another person or another nation. Other nations came to wage a war on the Oromo. So when you have a just cause, where it is to protect life, when it is to protect your dignity, then the chances of success is highly. The ultimate goal of war is to reestablish peace. I've spoken about that before, right? Um, and the other concept is the concept of proportionality, right? When you are waging a war, it should be proportional. And the last point is that when you are waging a war, you have to discriminate between combatants and non-combatants. Uh, the public should not be subjected to a war. And the final point is the war has to you have to have always an exit strategy. So what do we see? The Oromo conquest was accomplished by a war that the genocidal war that reduced the Oromo to have their original number when that war happened. In this war, the Oromo lost their lives, their land, their livelihood, their peace, and their security. For a century and a half, the Oromo lived in a bondage, subjected to extrajudicial killings, torture, physical harm, and imprisonment. During this time, the Oromo quest for equality was quashed many times by brute force. Um, and even the Oromo life nowadays is in grave danger. The Ethiopian Empire and it is stone-headed leaders, I call them. They are incapable of reforming or being reformed, and they cannot and will not tolerate the Oromo, let alone to accept them as equals and secure their peace. Because of that, the Oromo have the right and the duty to secure their freedom and to search for their lasting peace. The Oromo can rely on no one other than themselves. We have seen that the Oromo cannot rely on any external body or expect any external body to bring about their independence, their freedom. Neither the US nor the UN, neither the EU nor the AU will save the Oromo. The Oromo should not expect for any saving Messiah to come from without. It is incumbent on the Oromo to get rid of any form of domination and secure their nation's freedom. Only a society that is prepared for war, that builds its war capacity, that has a formidable defense force, can avert war. So imperial despots never had and never will grant freedom to any nation. So it is a nation's responsibility to fight and earn their freedom. The Oromo Liberation Army is the only Oromo vanguard force that we have. So because of that, it is incumbent on the Oromo society to rally behind the Oromo Liberation Army and to get rid of the imperial domination, to set our nation free, and also to build a just and democratic order in free Oromia. Finally, two points. One, there is no law of nature or of reason and of God that justifies the subjugation of the Oromo people and the colonization of their beloved Oromia. No. So nobody should use the laws of nature, the laws of reason, or the laws of religion to advocate for the subjugation of the Oromo people and the colonization of Oromia. It is obligation, duty, and responsibility of each Oromo to rally behind the Oromo Liberation Army and to create a free and democratic Oromia. It is our responsibility. It is our call. It is our time. So, as has been said earlier, freedom begins with setting one's mind free. If your mind is not free, you don't need any physical bondage to stay in bondage. So the time when people use religion, reason, ethics, moral principles to tie other people, to subjugate them, to reduce them, to compel them into bondage is over. As I said at the beginning, Paul says, Christ has set you free. So stand as free people. Thank you.